welcome to Sunshine for Your Life. You know, it is said that patience is virtue, and during the holiday week, and this has been a holiday week, newscasters will say the traffic will be heavy, pack your patience. Well, here's a story about a lack of patience. I was driving through a construction zone in Tennessee. I was a college professor there. This was the summer, but I usually taught in the summer as well as the winter. And I was going through this construction zone, and because it was the summer and it was hot, my windows were down, and we were just driving a little at a time, slowly through this zone. We were being led by various police officers telling us where to go and so forth. And I could see off to my right, there was a side street, and a young woman, and there were two in the car, was very, very aggravated because she couldn't just cut in. She was going to have to wait to be signaled to cut in. And she was gesturing with her hands, and she was talking loudly, so I could both see and hear her. Now, I went past where she was, and as I said, traffic was slow. And all of a sudden, I heard her scream, "Let me in, let me in." And then I heard the crunch of metal on metal. She had actually tried to force her way in, and in the process had smashed into the side of another person's car. Now, if she thought she was inconvenienced by construction, how much more would she be inconvenienced by hitting another car, causing an accident? She herself caused it. Life is filled with situations that need patience. And so I'm going to just turn to what I've been through in the last 3 weeks or so. I just came back of the most difficult surgery I have ever had. And it was a very high-risk surgery, and during this surgery you can have a stroke or you can have some kind of brain damage. Fortunately, I didn't, and I'm doing well. But for after you have the surgery, it's an endarterectomy of the carotids. They check you to make sure there are not any subtle signs of brain damage or a stroke. This type of surgery is usually not performed on the elderly because it's very hard to heal from. But I did well, and I'm back. I'm not 100%, and I probably won't play any musical instruments for another month until all the pain goes away. But nonetheless, I passed through the surgery. Now, you need to be patient if you're going to heal from a major operation or an accident or whatever it is that you're going through. One doctor said, you know, people do get nervous because we're going to cut into the artery that feeds the brain. I knew that, but I didn't need to hear it at that point. My surgery took a lot longer than expected because they ran into complications. It was 2.5 hours long. It was only supposed to be 90 minutes long, but due to the complications, it was longer. But what you have to remember if you are a patient and you're undergoing some kind of healing is that healing takes time. And you've got to give it the time that it needs. And this is where you have to have patience with your body because it heals at the rate that it heals at. And you can't do anything about it. So if you are a patient, then give yourself the time to heal. Don't rush into things too soon. And here is where your faith becomes important, because if you have the right attitude and you have faith in God, your healing can proceed much better than if you don't have some kind of faith, because you are just worried about what's going to happen next. But I know that God has it. The first scripture that I'm going to put up on the screen is Isaiah 53:5, and this is what it says. He was wounded for our transgressions. He was bruised for our iniquities. With his stripes we are healed. Now, that's not the total verse, so I'm going to go back and read the whole thing. He was wounded for our transgressions. He was bruised for our iniquities. The chastisement of our peace was upon him, and with his stripes we are healed. In other words, he took our illnesses upon himself. And that definitely helps us in the healing process. Now, this is not going to be on the screen, but Matthew 8:17 echoes this, because it says that it might be fulfilled which was spoken by Isaiah, which is the New Testament, but it's referring back to the Old Testament for what I just read. He took our infirmities and bore our sicknesses. So the thoughts are the same, and I'm always fascinated when you read something in the Old Testament and you read the same thing in the New Testament, because they're not separate. Everything is together in the Bible. You have your books and they all refer back to each other. Jesus quoted the Old Testament when he talked about God. So therefore, it both says, I'm going to read the whole thing once again. He was wounded for our transgressions. He was bruised for our iniquities. The chastisement of our peace was upon him, and with his stripes we are healed. And that would be Isaiah 53:5. And then Matthew 8:17 says that it might be fulfilled which was spoken by Isaiah. He took our infirmities and he bore our sicknesses, in reference to the same thing. As a matter of fact, it says, this is what it says, and this is what it also says in Isaiah, the two becoming one, in a sense, echoing each other. Then the next scripture I want up is Psalm 37, verses 4 and 5. And this is what it says. Delight yourself also in the Lord, and he shall give you the desires of thine heart. Let me read that again. Delight thyself also on the Lord, and he shall give you the desires of thine heart. Now it goes on from this. This will not be on the screen, but it goes on from this. It says, commit thy way unto the Lord, trust also in him, and he shall bring it to pass. So I'll read the two of them together. Delight thyself also in the Lord, and he shall give you the desires of thine heart. Commit thy way unto the Lord, trust also in him, and he shall bring it to pass. What will he bring to pass? The desires of your heart. What is the desire of your heart if you're ill? It's to get well. That's the main thing. Now, it is hard to be a patient when you're recovering from some kind of a change, whether the change is due to illness or accident or a bad personal situation, because we need healing from a lot, not just from health issues, but a lot of other issues as well. You want to get up, you want to do things, you want to take charge, but sometimes you just can't do it. You're not strong enough, you're not well enough, or it may be even something else. It may be a legal thing which impedes you, that you're not able to do it. Yet healing involves so much more than just physical illnesses. We also need healing from confusion, mental problems, unhealthy situations. You have the need for liberty from all of these things. Now, the third verse I'm going to put up is Luke 4:18 and 19. And here I'm going to read part of it and then read the whole thing. So Luke 4:18 and 19. The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he hath anointed me to preach the gospel to the poor. So let me read the whole thing. The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he hath anointed me to preach the gospel to the poor. He hath sent me to heal the brokenhearted, to preach deliverance to the captives, and recovery of sight to the blind, to set at liberty them that are bruised, to preach the acceptable year of the Lord. Now that mentions a lot of things. He has been sent to heal the brokenhearted. Who's the brokenhearted? Anyone who's emotionally traumatized or in a state of grief. To preach deliverance to the captives, anybody who's in prison or anybody who is a captive in their own home because they can't get out or something like that. I mean, you can apply this to all kinds of situations. Recovery of sight to the blind, and to set at liberty those that are bruised. What is it talking about? Well, you can be bruised emotionally. You can be hurt emotionally. You need freedom from all of these things, and God can give it to you so that your past hurts and your past wounds don't have to come up and haunt you. Now, what can be gained from all of this? Well, you have to realize that as we grow, as we change, as things happen to us, our bodies change and our minds change and our responses change. But I want to mention that the core of you is always the same. If you think back to what you were like when you were 12 years old, you felt like you. And then now, if you're close to 80s or maybe even older, you still feel like you. You know, you don't notice a difference in who you are. Now, you do change. Your attitudes can change. Your ideas can change and all of that. But the core part of you is always the same and is with you. It's called the concept of the eternal self. Psychologists talk about it, but look back, no matter what your age is, to when you were younger than you are now, and you can see that you still feel the same. You feel like the same person, and you should, because you are the same person. Change is not always bad, but change can be different. You can have good as well as bad changes, and what determines the change, whether it's good or bad, depends upon the situation that you're in. But if you change, then that may be your new reality. What you have to realize is that change, if a change is permanent, then it's your new reality. Supposing you're driving along and you're fine, and you get, unfortunately, in an accident, and you find that you have a spinal cord injury as a result of that accident, and now you're in a wheelchair. That's your new reality, because that change is going to be permanent. That's your new reality. And you have to learn to live with that. And it'll be a long time to adjust to the fact that you can no longer walk. But still, your personality is still intact, and your life is still intact. The difficulty in adjusting to change is that it seems to come out of the blue. Now, sometimes it doesn't come out of the blue, but you don't recognize what's going on, so it really seems to come out of the blue. And sometimes it does come out of the blue, just like if you have an accident and you hurt yourself and you're going to be in a wheelchair. So the change can come quickly. An accident, an illness, tumor, heart attack, infection, birth of a handicapped child that you did not foresee. It can happen quickly, and it does seem like it's coming out of the blue. It takes about 6 weeks to adjust to a change like that. When I first became diabetic, I was told it would take a good 6 weeks for me to realize and just kind of adapt to the fact that I now had that condition. And so, and that would be true, I would imagine, of any other thing. If you're diagnosed with Parkinson's, if you're diagnosed with myasthenia gravis or any of those major illnesses, it's going to take you a while to adjust to the fact that you have it. And then you have to learn how to deal with it. You even if you have somebody pointing out to you that you're old or you're elderly, you still have to grapple with the fact that that's true. The first time I was called elderly, I was in a Wendy's restaurant, and they asked me if I wanted the senior discount. I said, me, a senior? Do you think I'm a senior? And of course I was, but I was surprised because no one had ever told me that before. I'm still running on 30s time, and I'm, in my 60s and 70s then. And when I was interviewed by somebody, she said, are you living with anyone, is there anyone elderly in your apartment? I says, oh no. And she says, Pat, you're elderly. And I said, oh yeah, I guess I never thought of it that way. So I don't think, I guess, like an elderly person, but I have to realize that this is what I am. And there's no shame to it. It's just a miracle I got this far. So I'm glad to be healthy enough as an 80-year-old, pretty close to 80, to be doing the things that I'm doing. 3 to 4 television shows a week, a radio show for a friend of mine that's a pastor, and everything else that I'm doing. So I don't operate like an 80-year-old. And doctors have told me I'm the most active elderly person they've ever seen. Well, at any rate, I'm not bragging. This is just the state. If your state of mind is younger, I think you accomplish a lot more and you feel a lot better. If you're living with a new reality because you've been injured or you're recovering from an accident or whatever it is, know that you can learn to live life again. Life will be different, but it'll still be fulfilling. With God in the picture, you can realize a few things. For one thing, God has spared you for a purpose. That means you have work to do. God will always love you whether you have a disability or not. God will meet your needs no matter what they are, including your disabilities if you have them. If you carry your disabilities with grace, you can be a wonderful role model to other elderly people or other people who are injured who need to learn from you. In my surgery, I could have had a stroke or some other injury, but God spared me from all of that. When you become a Christian, God enters the picture and things do change, but in a very good way. I asked one of my relatives on her third wedding, she had already had 2 divorces, she was marrying again. I says, what's going to make this different? And she said to me, oh, it will be different because this time God is in it. And the marriage has been very successful, and she's doing fine, and so is her husband. So it finally worked, but it didn't work out until she decided to have God in the picture, as she said. So God is your shepherd. You are his sheep. Jesus is the good shepherd. You are the sheep of his pasture. He is going to lead you and guide you, and you don't need to be afraid of the changes. If changes come, and they're going to, it's inevitable, you can adapt to them and you can make the best of them. Remember that all things happen for a reason, and all things work to good for those who are called. So I'm going to close with this verse, Romans 8:28. All things work together for good to them that love God, to them who are the called according to his purpose. So we'll close it here and be doing something next week. Please join me then.